everybody. So.
Very good, yeah. Good morning and welcome to mLevel's ongoing webinar series. Today we'll be getting an overview of our analytics site presented by Chris Balser, mLevel's Director of Technology. A few important items before we begin. Chris, can you roll back one slide, please? Thank you. If you have any question or issue during the presentation, you can type us a private note by using the questions feature in the questions panel, or you can use the raise your hand functionality by clicking on the hand icon. And we can open up your phone line so that you can ask a question to the group directly. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris Balser to get us started. Chris, you there?
Hello, everyone. Yep, I'm here.
Thanks.
So today we are going to go through the analytics site as it is today, give you a little bit of a history of it, explain a little bit of some of the settings and filters that are built into the site, and then some of the features and functionality that we have now and where we're going with it in the future. To kick it off, I guess, going into the history of it, one of the things that really, how the mLevel analytics platform evolved was really it started as something that was supposed to be an export tool, and really that was only the primary use for it. So the whole goal was to be able to get the customer, the user data, knowledge data, any type of data that represents what activities occurred within the platform in a format that they can then take and do whatever they want to, whether that's in an LMS system, whether that's in a BI platform, a data warehouse of their own, or even just simple using Excel, doing some sort of pivots and stuff like that on it. From there, what we decided was, it'd be nice to have some sort of go-to place that you could start to look at the data in a graphical sense. So getting some charts that will go through and give you some view into that data without having to crunch through a CSV, because I think going through CSV files, while it's helpful for somebody who's more of a quant type of person, it's a little more challenging for somebody that's not used to it. So we built out some quick charts to kind of build out the site, and what we found was that was probably a little bit too quantitative, as it was a little harder to understand. While it made sense to us because we understood the data, a lot of times the users couldn't necessarily understand fully what we were aiming for. So we then re-filtered the way we did it, and we kind of went the other direction, and we took it down to, okay, let's try to bring it back to a very concise, simple version of an analytics site. And I think now what we're working on is we're trying to get ourselves into the middle of that. And if you think about the way that there are personas related to analytics, there are probably more than what's shown on the screen here, but the primary ones that would impact most of our customers are the account managers, which are mLevel folks that would be working with our customers to actually understand, well, this mission's succeeding, this mission's failing, what can we do to improve those type of metrics. Leadership, which is not only on the mLevel side, but also on the customer side, where maybe the customer leadership cares basically about the ROI and or a roll-up type thing, which is the same type of stuff that a board or mLevel leadership may care about as a higher level type of view. Then you have the buyers, the admins, the managers, and the players and the users. And I think really where our kind of sweet spot with the analytics site currently is really in the buyers and admin spot. We're really focused on the learning administrators, on how the questions work out. Are people actually engaged in it, which is more on the buyer side? And then, like I said, more of the knowledge stuff where it's like, if there's questions, how did somebody do on these questions? Not necessarily who that person is, but in general, if the question's been asked 10 times, how well are people doing on those questions? Because in that case, what they can do is they could actually step back and look at it and say, okay, maybe we need to actually modify the question a little bit to get the result that we're looking for, because that question is 100% right every time and nobody ever gets it wrong. There's no building knowledge going on. It's just maybe it's a slam dunk question that just gets passed over. Or it could be the other side of that spectrum, which is it's something that nobody's gotten that question right because maybe the wording's confusing or something like that. So what we've done is we've really kind of evolved into something that's a little more focused on the admin, even more so than the buyers, by adding a lot more of the question functionality. That's more of a typical learning admin or learning content manager viewpoint to really understand, here's a question, here's the answers, and how we can get past that. Now, going forward, our real goal is to start to go towards more of the manager, player, user world of data, which is something that's been requested for in the past, which is the ability to pull some of that tertiary data on different users, whether that's the office location of somebody, how the office is doing, how is a manager's team doing, and then being able to drill down into those things. Currently, we don't have that functionality built into this analytics site other than the leaders tab, which I'll get to later, which is basically just a viewpoint into the leaderboard. But the goal is for us to get to a point where, as an admin, as a buyer, you can go into the system and see, these 5 people are struggling in this area, or these 5 people haven't played at all. And I know that's another request that's been something that's come through the pipes over the time that we've had this site up, is to really get to, that's great that I see 10 people played, but what about the other 500 people that haven't gotten in there yet? Realistically, when it says somebody's got maybe 7 out of 10 have completed something, well, what about the other people that aren't there? Because it's really 7 out of those 500, not 7 out of those 10. So we are working towards that. And with that, we have a poll question.
Great. So, Josh, if you could pull up the poll for us. We have a few basic poll questions for you today, just to kind of get some interactivity into the webinar and also to gauge sort of the audience, basically gauging how much you've used this. So the first question is, have you used the mLevel analytics site? So please answer yes, I've used it frequently, or yes, I've only used it a few times, once or twice, or no, I have not used it yet. And we'll keep that open for a little bit here until Josh thinks that we're good. All right, so here's the results. So we've got half of you have used it, half of you haven't. So it's good to hear. So glad that the half that hasn't has joined us today.
All right, so based on that, it probably makes sense to start with the most simple part of it, which is just understanding how the site is laid out and how it fits into our mLevel platform. The mLevel platform as a whole consists of 4 different components. One is the application, which is probably the thing most people are familiar with, the users are familiar with, and probably the most interacted with component. The next component would be the mission manager, which is where content's created. Another component is the user management, which is where users can be managed. And lastly is the reporting site that we're talking about, which is also referred to as analytics at times. I think that's kind of what we're focused on. Component of what we call the mLevel Studio, as you see on the right there. And it does require a specific role to be able to get into this component. The other sites, like the mission manager and the user management site, those 2 will just require an administrator privileges. In the case of reporting, you can actually not be an administrator, but you could have a reporting role that allows you to get into this site. So that way you can actually give this to, maybe it is a manager that's managing one of the missions, you could actually give it to that single manager. We are actually in flight right now building out something that will give us a little more granular control over that, so you could actually have that somewhat hierarchical role-based permission level over it. So actually you could give it to a manager and only he or she would only see his or her team. That is not something currently in place. It's probably going to be something coming in like Q1 of 2016, but it is something that's on our roadmap. Okay, so that being said, one of the things that we did when we built out this analytics site is we broke it out into several sections. The completion section, which is really just an overview of how many people have actually completed things. An engagement section, which really is what it says, which is trying to understand how engaged people are in the different missions. The knowledge section, which is gauging the actual knowledge growth and retainment within these missions. Performance, which is how people have performed over time. Leaders, which is, like I said, a leaderboard view of things that actually gives you the ability to see that group level data. And then export, as I said, was the kind of beginning point of this site altogether. So another thing that people do run into a lot of problems with the site or have issues with at times is understanding how the filters work within the site. There are several filters that are applied. These filters are not on by default, with the exception of the mission, because the mission actually just allows you to kind of bring the data down a notch. But the other three components are the outliers, inactive missions, and incomplete games. And these lead to a lot of common questions, so I wanted to address those. One thing initially is starting with the inactive missions. Really what that is that's your ability within our mission manager to make a mission inactive but not lose any of the data. So when you turn that mission off, you'll be able to get it out of your, I guess the best way to look at it is reduce the clutter within this dropdown, because you don't want to see a mission that is something that was run a year ago, but you may want to be able to get back to those analytics at some point. So you could then say, well, let me see the inactive missions, and you'll see it in that dropdown. Those missions in the dropdown would actually be represented with an asterisk to show that they're inactive, and then you'd be able to pick those out. That also applies to the dashboard where the dropdown doesn't exist because you're looking at all missions. But if you were to go down a level, turn this on, it's actually going to apply to that page as well. Not entirely intuitive, and we're working on the user experience of that, but it is something that is in place. The next component is the idea of incomplete games. So one of the things that we found pretty early on in the mLevel platform growth stage was that people would, in a time of extreme competitive leaderboard type of watching stage, I guess is the best way to put it, what they would do is people would be, okay, I get 2 or 3 questions, I get a couple that I didn't get right, jump out, start over, do it over again. Or as we get into something like the more gamey games like Shape Escape, Quizball, those types, maybe they see something that's more of a layout that's more beneficial to them in the long term, so they're going to just run that one as opposed to one. Maybe the blocks in Block Party don't line up the way they want it to, so they fail early and they go quick. What this allows is this allows you to say, only include the games where somebody actually got to a complete end of a game. And that can happen in 2 ways. One is, or actually 3 ways depending on the game. One specific way is you obviously finish the game. That would be actually answering all the questions that were available or getting to the end at what is called a natural completion. Another option would be pausing and quitting, which is actually going to quit from a game, but it's an action that's something that you actually did get to the end and you quit. The last one is actually failing out of a game, but really what it is if you see the game end screen, that's considered a completed game, and that's what we use as our flag on that. And then the last thing is the idea of outliers. Outliers is really something that's used from statistical purposes, which is really normalizing the data. And normalizing the data, really what that allows you to do is say, if you think back to probably like high school, even college for some, the idea of the bell curve, really what you want is you want the fat part of that graph to be represented within this data. And what removing of outliers will do, or hide outliers in this case, is it'll take those people that are on the edges of that and pull them out of the data to try to make the data more representative of the overall population of players. An example of that would be if you have the example I gave earlier, that let's say you have 100 users. You have 100 users, and one or two of those users have played 400 or 500 times versus the average of 13 to 15 plays for the majority of the people. Those 2 people are going to skew all of your numbers from an engagement and performance perspective, so you may want to actually take those people out. And the same goes true with if you have your average being around 30 or 40, and then there's a couple people only played 1 time or even 2 times, they may get pulled out as well. So the idea is that it only includes 95% of the population. It doesn't include 100% if you hide those outliers. And what that's doing is taking those 2 tails off of that data. Moving on, we have another poll.
Great, thanks, Chris. So before we dive into a walkthrough of the site, just kind of want to get another poll up here. So we want to know which type of report dashboard is the most valuable for you or to you. So there's a few different types up here that we have. Just kind of curious to get some feedback on what you users think is the most valuable. So the first one being completion, which is number or percent of players who have completed the missions. The second one, there's knowledge, so basically a cumulative mission mastery around specific learning concepts. performance, which is more game-specific, outlining all the questions and answer breakdown. Engagement, which is the number of players and game players for a mission and its games. And then lastly, the leaders, so basic leaderboard type thing where you have player or group rankings for a mission and also for the games within that mission. So give a couple seconds here for people to answer this, and when Josh thinks we're good, we'll roll on to the next slide. All right, so it looks like the majority want to see that knowledge with performance, so the game-specific question and answer breakdown as a close follower. So great stuff. Back to you, Chris.
All right. So the next step really is kind of the natural progression of actually going through the different components of the site and walking through what exactly are we measuring with these things and what type of actionable items can come from these different pages. Because I have found in the past in talking to some of our customers that there is a question that constantly comes up, which is, okay, I look at this data, but what am I actually supposed to do with this data? What I'd like to do is try to give you some ideas of where maybe you can address things in the data, or maybe there's ways that we can kind of slice it in another way that can try to get you to exactly those questions that you are trying to answer. So from there, I'm going to bounce back out to a browser, which will show us what is called our deployment validation tenant. So this is data that we use actually for testing upon when we do deployments every month or so. We actually come in here, and this is kind of the data that is our way of checking to make sure things are flowing through correctly. So in the end, this isn't necessarily real data, but some of them are data or are missions that people had created for testing purposes, or in the case of the one we're looking at, for training purposes when Holly had joined us. So that being said, I will start with what is commonly referred to as the dashboard. While it's not necessarily a true dashboard, it's a viewpoint into all of the missions that are currently housed within the site from a perspective of how many people have completed that. In this case, you'll see that you have the missions listed across the top here, and what it's breaking it into is the two different colors for people who have not completed the mission, which is also termed mLevel within our system. So if you were to go into the mission manager and you're going to work on the mission, if you set those parameters around what % of stars are required to mLevel a mission, that's what is referred to as completed as well. In this case, and I'm going to refer to this 21st century best picture trivia for pretty much all of this demo. There have been 11 people who have played. One person, Andrew, is the one that has actually mastered it or completed it, and 10 people have not. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to look at it and say, you know, John, Chris, Kevin, you guys are almost there. You need to go do something. This may lead you down the path of being able to reach out to those people, sending an email to them or whatever. If it's, in our case, we're all in the same office, walk over and say, hey, why'd you stop playing? Maybe give it another shot. You can get past that hurdle. If you can get past it, you can get into the group of what would make it 2 to actually show that you've actually completed the mission. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. Some other things that are in this that a lot of people have not noticed. Well, other than the fact there's a lot of missions in this tenant, there are some features that are hidden under this context menu. One being export chart to PNG, which is actually available on all of the charts within our site. The ability to sort ascending or descending, which you'll see how it's switching now, and it's changing the data for you. Additionally, the ability to sort in alphabetical order to be able to see the missions in a different way. And I think what this allows you to do is really, it allows you to fine-tune how you're looking at it, or say, do have a scenario like we do here, where we have probably, I don't know, 30 missions. It allows you to find it a little easier. So this is giving you a couple ways to do that. And again, like I said, if you use the sorting, ascending, and descending, it actually allows you to use that potentially as a viewpoint into, you know, the ones that haven't had as many completions. Maybe those are areas that you need to actually address in communications, marketing to your people, face-to-face, whatever it needs to be to get people back into the system to complete those missions. So moving on to the engagement tab. Again, we're sticking with the 21st century best picture trivia. Now you do see these filters that I had mentioned a couple of slides back, which can be applied to this screen. And really what that's doing is it's going to apply, and you'll actually see it if you were to check this. You can see the data refreshes. This obviously doesn't really help. What it's doing is actually just trimming down the number of missions in this drop-down. And you can see that the inactive one's got a star next to it, like I said. It actually says inactive next to it, so it's clear that it's there. And then lastly, the outliers, which will trim out the people on the ends, and then you can see that the numbers go down as a result. But what it might do is actually give you a more accurate average, which you can see came down a little bit because there's probably some people that played an excessive amount of times that would be taken out of this thing. So moving on to the charts that are within this, one of the points of this is really to see, in this case of this mission, it looks like there's a trend where this area here is where we see the majority of the people played. What you can do on this chart is you could actually say, okay, well, I want to slice it down and zoom into that section and take a little closer look at it. You have that ability to zoom into that smaller section, and now you can actually export that to PNG and see the data that you want. Additionally, what this allows us to do is to see, this was really active at the early part of August. There's a little bit of a point here where, granted, we're looking at data of the mLevel group, product group primarily, so that's a team of about 10 people, so that's why you're not going to get a huge number of hit players. But what you can see is that there was some activity, kind of peaked a bit again, and then it's kind of died off. What this actually can help you do is understand that maybe a mission is starting to die down. Maybe you have to look at it and say, okay, if this is starting to die down, do I have another mission in the pipe that's going to be able to be something that will continue the trend of people being active within the system? Or is it your expectation that the mission's almost kind of dying or run its course? And what you really want to do is you want to go make that inactive because you don't want it to show up anymore because people have gone through and they've played it and they're good at this point. They don't need to go any deeper into that. Those are two questions that you can answer directly off of this specific chart itself. Additionally, there's a chart here on the bottom that actually breaks down to understand where are people actually being active within this mission. So you can see in this case, Checkpoint, Knowledge Navigator, and Academy are the few areas that are probably the highest in terms of engagement. Additionally, what this allows you to do is it allows you to kind of dig in. You can see how many plays have actually been played. And yes, they are via this hover pop-up kind of thing. But you can get a little bit of additional information that you may not see right out of the gate. And lastly, these are the types of charts that are actually kind of useful if you're going to do some sort of executive summary on how the mission's going. Any of these charts can be exported. So if you were to export it to PNG, you could actually do something similar to creating a little PowerPoint, throwing something in there, dropping that chart in, which this is the chart that was exported directly out of the site, throwing it into a PowerPoint or into whatever your presentation mechanism is, and then building that out, saying, hey, this is where we're struggling with things, and maybe this is something that you're actually going to go and have your conversations with your leadership, or maybe with the teams or the managers to say, maybe this chart's not the right one, but maybe it's a chart that really does show engagement. You're like, hey, the engagement's dropping down. Put that chart in there, and you can actually have that right there. You don't have to then give access to the reporting dashboard to everybody. Next, we go into the knowledge report, or knowledge view of our system. Now, you'll notice one thing, that outliers are disabled for this chart, or this page. And the reason for that is because this is not based on the number of plays of people use the system, which is what all the other outliers are in the other sites. What this is actually doing is this is going to be very focused on, in the idea, kind of using the concept or idea of tags. It's really based on tags, topics, and really your knowledge grid or the tags that are used in your manual questions. And what this is actually allowing you to do is see how people are performing on those different concepts. So in this case, how people are doing in the Gladiator movie, Crash, Chicago, Beautiful Mind. But also, if you click on that, you can actually go down and see, how well they knew about the award year, the director, the genre, log line, user rating, etc. And you can do that with any of these. This one also has the ability to do your sort ascending, descending, and your alphabetical version of the data as well. If you were to move to the bottom of the screen, you start to see it starts to break it out into topics. So in this case, when Holly created the mission, she had created 2 different topics with 2 sets of different movies and different types of attributes to be represented. So you can see this really shows how people are doing. In addition, the way it's broken down is on the left, you're going to see from 51% to 100%. On the right, you're going to see people from 0% to 50%, I believe. What that's going to show is these are the areas where people are struggling. These are the areas that people are doing really well. So maybe you don't need to continue to ask questions on this area. And granted, because this is movie trivia, it's a little different than something that may be like a compliance or something like that. Whereas in a compliance situation, you may have something that is, you know, if there's stuff on this side over here where the people are struggling, you may need to reiterate that. Or maybe it's an area where training needs to be modified in some way to start to pull more of that information that gets people to truly start to understand these different areas. Additionally, you can actually click into this question mark, and it's going to show you which questions were asked and how well people did on those questions. And you can expand these numbers as well. And in summary, that's the knowledge page. Next one up is the performance page. The performance page is really a way to dig into the different activities to understand how well people are doing and how often they are playing these different activities. What we're really trying to show here is we're trying to show when is it that people seem to hit their peak of mastery within these activities. That's what this performance hotspot represents. So in this scenario, the average number of plays is somewhere between 6 and 7, probably about 6 1/4. But most of the people hit their 100% mastery at about 8 plays. So what that shows is you kind of get where people need to be playing that. So if you think back to the engagement page, or if you use that in combination with this, you can actually see that if I have most of my people play this academy activity only 2 or 3 times, they're probably not getting to that point of mastery because of the fact that they haven't hit the performance hotspot. That is a way that people can start to do that messaging and say, hey, maybe you need to spend more time in academy, or maybe you need more information around this so you can start to keep increasing your knowledge. Or even on the other side, the flip side is talking to those people and understanding why they actually did not continue to go back to those things. Within this page as well, we also go down and do some breakdown of the questions. Again, we start to go down the path of how often are questions asked and how well people did in those. So in this scenario, you see what the question was, you see what the correct answer was, what the wrong answer was, and then you can see how it breaks down based on this scenario. You can kind of get a few examples of how that works. And this would be representative for all the activities are actually in the mission. In some cases, maybe those activities were never played, so that's where you'd see messages like this, so there are no plays yet. Next, we have the Leaders tab, or Leaders page. The Leaders page really is a representation of the data within the leaderboard scenario. So if you look at this, this is very similar to what you would actually see in the leaderboard if you were to look at the everyone normal leaderboard for all people on a mission. You could also go down to the activity level and go into each one of the activities individually, or you could actually do a breakdown and try to understand how people are doing across different offices. Now in this scenario, again, this is our product team, so they're all going to be located in Chicago. However, we have people in Atlanta, Chicago, and Denver, so you could actually see if there were people in those other areas where they had been playing. One thing to note here is that one of the reasons that this data is a little different than what you see in the other sites is this is actually coming from our leaderboard services, which is not hosted within this analytics site. It's a common question that seems to come up is, well, why can't I get this data from the exports or from something else? We are currently in process of trying to integrate those a lot better, but due to some of the concerns around user metadata being trickled into some of these exports, we chose not to have that data out of the gate, and we're starting to work towards getting something a little more aggregated so that can be used in another way. So at that point, before moving into the exports, we have another poll question.
Great, thanks, Chris. Josh, if you could go ahead and pull that. This is our last poll question, poll number 3. Really quick question. Have you ever used the export tool in our analytics site? The answer options are yes, frequently, yes, but I've used it once or twice, or no, I've not used it yet.
I'm not watching it really. I'm listening to the background noise. Who's giving today's?
All right. So when Josh thinks we're good on this, we can bring it back. And so it looks like about 60% have not used it. And only a few of you use it frequently. So Chris, take that information and show those people that haven't used it what they can do.
All right. So data exports, the beginning of the analytics site. Really what the data exports do is it gives you as the administrator or the reporting admin the ability to export data from how people have played down to how well they know things, and that's pretty much most of it. One thing to note is that one of the things that's actually happening anytime somebody's playing a game is we're actually capturing events for every single thing that somebody does from the time they push the start button until the time they finish a game. So that may be something as simple as somebody pushing the start button. We have an event that we record that says, John Doe pushed the start button. He started this mission or this activity. It also shows something as granular as question was asked, answers were displayed, answers were chosen, question was answered, and continuing on all the way through the end of the game. That includes pauses as well. What that allows us to do is really start to generate all this data that you see within this site. Additionally, what you see in the exports, most of what we do is we try to take that data and get it as granular as we can for that user purpose, but then also to give it to the end users or to the end customer to be able to do their type of measurement and crunching and slicing and dicing as needed. So with that, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of the reports and kind of give you a little bit of a view into some of it. So when you come to the exports page, it's going to ask you if you want to create a report. If you're going to run the report in the current state, so that means export now, you don't really need a title, but you could if you want to. If you want to save it, you have to have a title. Not necessary. It seems like the majority of people don't actually end up saving it because they actually want it to happen now. But if you actually start to utilize some of these other features, you need to save it to be able to make those things happen. So some of the report types. One of the report types is called the knowledge one, which is really going to be that focus on how have people done on each question individually. This is where you can actually dig into a user as well as a question and the topic and knowledge information, which is like your tags and your knowledge grid and all that. All of those concepts, you can actually get that information from this report. This report can provide you, John Doe answered this question, this question, this question, this question within this gameplay, and he got it right, wrong, whatever. But it also shows you which question, what answers they may have selected in the case they were wrong. So you could actually deduce that, in the case of the movies one, maybe this is somebody who was born in 2000, so maybe they don't really know the movies that were around in 2000. So you could actually deduce that they seem to always get the questions wrong. They have options that are from the 2000s, even though it's a mix and match of the 2000s and 2000 teams. That's kind of one example. Obviously, there's a lot more that you can go beyond that. The question performance or question effectiveness report is actually one that will dig a little deeper into the actual questions themselves. This takes the user out of the mix and really just pushes on this idea of how well are people doing on certain questions. It really ties heavily into the concept that's happening within the performance page, where you can actually see the question, how well people perform on those things. And I will go in and show you some examples of these different reports after I kind of walk through the ideas. The next one is the engagement. The engagement is going to show you a row per play of every single activity that's been played. This is going to be your most granular from a play perspective. There's no aggregation happening here. This is how did somebody do on this specific activity or gameplay, period. And it will show every row for that. A lot of times, this is probably a little bit too much for an LMS type of thing, but this may be somewhere where you can see, you could start to run some type of trending on, how have people done from this point to this. And you can actually see, if somebody played 50 times, you can actually see how they progressed through those 50 times, as opposed to the next one, which is the performance one, which actually does that aggregation for you up front. It's actually going to give you your averages, your mins, your maxes, do some of the aggregation of the engagement report for you, so you don't have to do that. It's going to give you kind of your best case scenario. It's also going to show how far have they progressed over time, but in a simple one row per person per activity perspective. The next two are two that had been created, I should say, for customers specifically in the LMS integration perspective. The LMS Nightly is something that's actually going to be able to provide you information that could go into your LMS and actually provide you with a way to match it up to some of the courses that may exist in your LMS system. The Nightly one is going to give you a lot more data than the trimmed will. The trimmed will only give you best scores for that last time frame, so if it's 24 hours, a week, whatever that is. The Nightly is actually going to give you everybody's best scores, period, as of that point. So it's a little different. It's not activity within the time frame. It's actually all-time activity. So that's how they differ. So that being said, I can bring up some of the examples of these reports. So when you do an export, in this scenario, if you're doing an export now, you're actually going to see something that is a zip file, and it looks a lot like this. It's got a GUID and a .zip. Within that, you'll get all of your ports. So in the scenario that I had picked, if I had picked all of these, like so, you would wind up with a zip file that contains these reports. So one of the things to note is I will go into the knowledge one because it's the first one on the list over there. And you'll see that one thing I did do is I checked this checkbox to include mLevel IDs. This is something that a lot of times from the customer perspective may not be all that important, but it may be good for troubleshooting perspective if you want to be able to, in some cases we have customers that don't want to bring through some of the customer information or the user information, but they can use our IDs to actually use those on their side. If you were to look at this, it's going to be hard to look at because there's a lot in it, but you can start to see the type of data. So there's the question, what the topic was, the item, some of the information, what the correct answer was, the topic, and you can see it's going through incorrect answers and how the incorrect answer ties to the knowledge grid, addition with all the other incorrect answers, whether or not the incorrect answer was hidden, because in some of our games over time you actually have questions that end up being hidden, answers that end up being hidden. You can see that as it goes through. And then you can also see what attempt did somebody answer correctly on, how many times they've made attempts at answers, and then whether or not they answered it. So in this scenario, you see somebody that didn't even attempt to answer the question, and they just bailed on it, which means they have no mastery. What this does, too, is it allows you to see how much was accrued on that turn. So when the kind of key point to that is, if you're actually looking at the mastery score, you can actually use this to determine, on this question, this person actually only accrued 0.33, so 33% of the possible points. That's a way that you can start to understand, okay, now I get exactly why that calculation is created. Additionally, you get timestamps on when all these events occurred. So there's a couple things you can kind of tie together. So this is actually, it's hard to see because these are, the questions go through too quickly. But what you can see is you can actually see this has the question number in it too. So you can actually see the order of which the questions were asked. Because our question generation system actually does generate things in a random order, there may be a scenario where you want to see, okay, well, every time this is the 14th question or 15th question, people get it wrong. I know in standardized testing world, that's actually very important because you actually have people that do end up getting to a point where they start to get tired, or things start to they just run out of energy for the topic. This probably becomes a little more relevant when you get to a Pathfinder mission or Pathfinder activity that may have a pretty lengthy number of questions, a lengthy tree of questions that you could go through, that this would actually be a way to see, okay, it seems like people are going too deep into this. Maybe I need to split into 2 scenarios, for instance. So that's just some information here. One last thing that actually gets asked quite a bit is around these timestamps. So all of our reports actually have timestamps, and actually the entire database is based on the idea that everything is in UTC format, which is basically Greenwich Mean Time. And what that is, it's a standardized time, so that way it's not going to get switched. It's going to be the same for everybody. So you can actually have apples-to-apples comparison. There have been requests in the past to have that localized to your local location. We have not yet put that in place. We're considering it for upcoming versions. Next, I will go into the question performance. So it's a little more manageable within one view. And you can see your mission, topic, the question itself, what was tagged into it, and then also how many people got it correct, how many got it incorrect, and then the challenging math of doing what that percent would be. That's kind of what this one is. It's pretty simple, really. It's not a whole lot to it. And I will move on to the engagement one. Again, this is the engagement one starts to get you down the path of a row per play for the user for an activity. So you'll see in this case, Andrew's played it quite a bit, I guess, so have I. But you can also see it's broken down by the different activities. So in this case, Andrew has played this activity 5 times, and you can see how his score has changed over time. What's his mastery percentage? So he started a little low, and he's gotten all the way up to 91%. So it's pretty impressive growth. And you can actually see that by the rankings. In addition, you can see what gameplay number was that. So this is a scenario where you can actually see that somebody started somewhere where they didn't really know the content very well, started to know it a little more, knew it a little more, knew it a little more, and finally hit the point of mastery and achieved the 3 stars that are required. And again, you get that completion data here as well. So that's where that completed information comes from. Next, I will go into the performance. Now, performance is going to show you in the scenario that we just talked about. It's going to show you a roll-up of how well somebody knows something. So I will use Jake as my guinea pig on this one. And what you can see here is you can see that for the fast lane activity, Jake's minimum points, maximum points, and obviously this is a little bit challenging when you look at, this one actually changes a little bit, so you see that there was some change. But you see his min-max average on accuracy, the knowledge score, which is where those mastery accrued is pulled from, what the most and least you can get. So in the case of, what's the denominator to your equation. Also tells you some of the time information, which, and this is another question that comes up quite frequently, is around, what I see these relatively large numbers when I see duration. All of our durations are calculated in milliseconds, because you have to realize that there are cases where somebody might be cranking through questions pretty quickly. Yes, you could probably capture it at seconds, but the reality is our goal is to try to capture as much detail as possible and then allow you to take that data out and do what you need to do with it to pull it to minutes and seconds or minutes or seconds or whatever you find most reasonable. In a lot of cases that I've integrated with different LMSs, usually they do hours, so this does become somewhat of a problem for them. However, that's where you start to wonder, in a case of a game, that a game's only supposed to last about 3 to 5 minutes. If it's supposed to last 3 to 5 minutes, calculating that in hours doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. And then it shows you a little bit of some percentage population type stuff where it's like, okay, how much do their points change? How much do their knowledge accuracy change? So this can start to show how well people have increased over time or decreased in some cases. And then we will go to the 2 LMS feeds. These are a lot more verbose, but what this allows you to do is it actually allows you to tie in some of the identifiers that are pulled through for the different activities and missions. So specifically in the LMS world, if you're using a mission as a course, for instance, we have customers that will actually fill in, and I'm not going to do it here, but you can get an idea if it's like course 1, 2, 3, 4 in, I don't know, item type game, something like that. What you can use then is when this export comes through, you can actually have this be something that actually shows up in your LMS system by using these custom identifiers that basically create that link between your mLevel missions to the courses that you have within your LMS system. These are set up within the advanced configurations within the mission manager. Additionally, there's activity custom fields if you want to go down to that level, but we have not seen anyone that has gone to that level at this point. And then lastly, the trimmed export, which is the same exact thing, but only for the last time frame that I actually ran the data for, which in this scenario I ran it for 30 days, so this would be the best score in the last 30 days. Let's see. And then, okay, so some of the filters that you can provide on here, as I said about the include mission or mLevel IDs, you can do that if you want to. It does seem to clutter data a lot. A lot of people don't use it, but it is an option for you. You can also select a mission or multiple missions to do an export for. Within that export, you don't have to do that. You can just go do all. And then you have several date options that you could use if you want. Since left export is only going to run on saved exports because there's no way for us to calculate the time of when you ran a report if it's a new report. So it's just something to note with that one. And then obviously your custom one is allowing you to pick whatever you want. You can even put present if you'd like. By typing in present, you will get to have data up to from a date to today or current time. Lastly, there are 3 different types of ways that you can actually get the data out. The more standard way is just pushing download, which is just going to do an export now, which I'm going to trim this guy down just to so you can see it. Give you a simple one. I take this down to just that one we've been working with. I do export now. You can see this happen. Now I can download it, and you'll see that zip file that I showed you before, and you can see it there. Then you close it, and you can open this file up, and you'll see that that has the data in it. The 2 exports that I picked for the 21st century, you'll see the data that's in there. Next option is to actually email it to somebody. So now what you could do is you could actually do this. I can type. It'll validate. Oops. Validates that it's an email, and it allows you to actually set that to export if you want to. Additionally, one thing that makes that nice is you actually could do set up recurring. You could have it happen every day. Good example of this is one of our customers requires to report every day at 4 p.m. So what they do is they set up an email that will actually send an email to whoever the manager is to then get that report. Then you get that email, you click on it, it comes into here, and it allows you to download the file, and you don't have to go through setting this up every single time. The last option, and this is common for more of the LMS scenario, is being able to set up your own SFTP or FTPS server instance. What this is going to do is it's actually going to export the file to our servers, pick it up, and then forward it onto the location that's selected. So that would be somewhere where jobs are run for your LMSs. That type of stuff could happen right through here. Obviously, this is going to have to be valid. A lot of times you might have to work with IT to get that set up. You can always work with us, whether it's me or Jose Velez on our infrastructure team, and we can work with your infrastructure folks to try to get this up and running for you, or work with you to make sure we have everything in line. And I believe that's what we got for exports. So some of the future, I think I've alluded to some of this, but what we are actually in the process of doing right now is we're starting to build out a more robust data warehouse platform. This will take us down the path of more granular data capture. It will allow us to start to get more of the groupable field information. So that office tie, that manager tie, if you wanted to, favorite colors, doesn't really matter what comes through. The information that comes through in your master file, up to 10 fields, we can actually pull that through into this data warehouse. So you'll now be able to have that information within your data exports as well. This is not something that's available now. Our goal is probably to have this done for what we're calling our mLevel 3.0 timeframe, so just around the end of the year, early next year, to have something out there that will allow you to start to pull this information. With that, you're going to actually be able to do some worldwide aggregation. So if you have a customer that actually has tenants that are sitting in 3 different regions, so if you have players in Europe, players in Asia, and players in the United States, we're actually doing some aggregation that will aggregate up to the mission or up to a specific component that allows you to actually see, well, how are we doing worldwide? without actually doing anything about the user, because you can't do the user information across the different geography of boundaries due to privacy laws. So we're working on that. Obviously, there's challenges due to legality there. We are getting there. And then the last component is what we call our campaign management. Campaign management is really going to be taking those actionable items and building in something that can help you as a learning admin to really market your campaigns, market your missions, understand exactly what's happening within the missions to understand if people are playing them or not, but be more proactive about it and actually allow you to set up like start dates, end dates, those type of things. So that's where we're going with it. We're going to have a kind of beta version of that by about Q1 of next year, but soon after that we'll continue to move on. And kind of a quick recap, what we're really doing is, I mean, as I said, it's really going through the different personas and really how we are focused now, which is at the admin and the buyer level. We continue to optimize. We're trying to make sure that the analytics site will perform for you and be able to get you the data you need. In the last 3 to 6 months, we've probably made almost a 100x improvement on some of the performance times of some of the queries. So the site should be a lot more responsive than it had been. We're definitely continuing to optimize that, and it will not change. We're going to continue to move. We want to make sure we keep giving you the data you need. And then lastly, we're just understanding what the different parts of the reports are, what the exports provide you, and what you can do with those things. Additionally, as I've gone through some of the enhancements, we will be continuing to give you information as time comes through to really dig into what are these improvements and enhancements coming up. And at that, I think Jeff's got a little something about our next meetup. Or I'm sorry, our next webinar.
Yeah, so first of all, just thanks, Chris. That was I think it was a great walkthrough. It really shows the power of our analytics tools and how you can help actually get the detailed data through all the exports and everything. That's pretty awesome. So yeah, so basically we've got a upcoming webinar in October. We'll be discussing examples of how you can use micro-learning, spaced repetition, gamification, Bloom's taxonomy, all of those modern learning strategies within mLevel, within the platform. So that'll be taking place on Wednesday, October 14th. So make sure to save the date on that. And then if you could jump back to the other slide. At this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions. So you can either type in a question using the questions panel input box, or you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon, and we can unmute your phone, and you can ask your question directly. We'll give those a few minutes to come in, or a couple seconds anyway. Josh, I don't know if you had any questions while Chris was actually talking.
Yeah, Jeff, we have a couple, and I'll go ahead and present them out, and either yourself or Chris can answer them. That would be great. The first one that we had come in is, are you looking into tying reporting tags into manual questions for the question exports?
So I think I can handle this one, Chris. So the question, I think what they're asking is, we use some reporting. For reporting, we use tagging for manual questions. Right now, I don't think you get that information in the question exports for the manual questions. So yeah, this is one of the top items on our feature request board for analytics improvements as we're picking those off. So as Chris mentioned, we've been highly focused on the performance improvements, but we should be addressing this in the coming months. So.
And one other one we had while Chris was speaking says, I'm looking for individual player level data for reports that currently are only available in the dashboard at the mission level. Did I hear correctly that I can get this information from the export tool? So I think they're looking for individual player level data.
Yeah, so if you go through all the exports, obviously the question performance does not give you user data, but within the engagement, you're going to get the most granular user level data about how often people are interacting, how they're performing. Performance will roll that up, but it's all at user level. If you go into the knowledge one, you'll actually see how well people know different topics, different items at the actual question level. So you can get down to the user level in those spots. Now what that does not give you is it does not give you the ability to pull through groupable fields. Like you're not going to see that John and Janet and Jane and Ryan and Carrie, just using the names that are on the screen right now, that group represents Team X. Team X, this is how well they're doing together. You're not going to get those groupable fields in the current state. but you can get to those users. And what we recommend at that point is you can take a roster file of your own, take that VLOOKUP it with our export file, and you then can create that same pivot that you're trying to get at.
Great, thanks, Chris. Anything else, Josh?
Okay. Yeah, actually, one just came in. It looks like probably, Chris, they're looking at the exports. It says, why is the duration time in milliseconds that seems very granular and hard to decipher? I would prefer to see this in minutes and seconds format.
So as I somewhat touched on earlier, the reason for the timestamps, or the durations being in milliseconds is because of our games being so short. In the scenario that you have a gameplay that only takes a minute, if you're doing it down to the minutes and seconds, it may not be all that granular. And if you're doing something that we're actually going to be switching somebody, taking into effect the leaderboards, for instance, the leaderboards, if you have 50 people that have played in about a minute, those milliseconds actually do count. That's the main reason it's that way. I do agree that it is extremely granular, but again, it's the ability to give you the most granular data you can to then take it and do what you need to do with that. One of the things we're looking into is to add an additional field to those reports. That would just basically be another column that just those minutes, or the durations, and puts them into minute-second calculations, so you don't have to perform those calculations for it. That's something that we could probably add to the exports in the near term, and it would not be a huge impact. And it sounds like it's something that would be a huge impact for the customers, so it's something that we have on our roadmap.
Okay. Jeff, it looks like we have one last question, if we have time for it.
Sure, go for it.
Is there any way to filter data by date ranges that we could view on certain reports, specifically focused like on the engagement report, it looks like?
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that's going to be addressed in the campaign management part that Chris was talking about, right, Chris?
Correct. Yeah, and it's something that we've considered with some of the reports, like putting a filter on there. The biggest thing is just understanding where is most valuable to the end users. So if there are people out there that would like to give us additional information on how they would like to use that, where it would be most applicable, how, is it across specific missions, is it across many missions, that type of information, please reach out to us and let us know, because I think we're really trying to narrow down the user experience on that side and trying to understand exactly the use case, because we want to build what's best for the customer, not what we have gut feel about.
All right, great. Any last questions coming in, Josh? Are we good?
No, I think we wrapped it up. That's it. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, perfect timing. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to show us everything. And again, if you want to just bump that slide over to the next one to kind of show the October webinar, just a reminder to save that date if you're interested in that. I think that'll be a good one. So otherwise, thanks for your time, everybody, and we hope you have a great week. Look forward to seeing you in October.